In this video, we're going to be going over installing Altium, getting it set up with the server, connecting the R drive at Western's campus, basically getting everything you need to be ready to start working on your project. So we're going to go from a blank computer, I've got a blank slate computer here, hopefully all the way to working Altium with a mapped R drive from Western. And then in the follow-up video to this, we'll basically just jump right into actually using Altium to do the design project. So a couple things to note: this is basically a blank computer. It's been used a little bit in the past, but it's pretty much blank. And I'm going to be going off of the guidelines that were created by Reza that are posted on Canvas. So if we go, let's just go to Canvas. So blank slate computer here, www Canvas. Okay, so mine might look a little bit different than yours, but basically we're just going to go to Files, Handouts, Altium Remote Setup. And, nope, I don't want to show that. Sorry. That document has passwords on it. Hopefully I closed that before. So that's how we get to the document. That one's got passwords that we use for accessing Altium, which I don't want to get onto the YouTube. So we're going to use a modified version that I have on the desktop. This is that same file, but the passwords are cleared out here. But I showed you how to get the document from scratch. So now we're just going to follow this document. So we're going to go to altium.com. No, I'm gonna. We'll open up a new web browser here. I'm having such an issue here. Altium.com. And this says go to downloads. I think I had an issue with this before. Download the latest version. Yeah, with me, I couldn't download it. It didn't do the pop-up to log in, which is a little different than what it says on the instructions, which is partially why we're doing this. So what you can do is you can go to sign in. So you can sign in with that username and password that's on this document. And then now that we're signed in, we can go up to, now it goes away. It's funny. I know I did that before. Maybe we can just go back to downloads. Well, it's somewhere. Downloads, here we go. Gotta kind of stumble around to find the downloads page after you're logged in. So we'll download the latest version. And going through here, we'll just run it. So these are all in the instruction. The instruction kind of steps you through this. We're going to once again enter that password. We don't need all that. So, you can install them if you want, but now one thing is I am connected to the network at Western, so I kind of have a bit of a fire hose of the internet right now. So don't participate. So if my download goes a little bit faster than yours, 92 megabytes per second, yours might not quite go that fast, but you get the idea. So I will try to, I will log in through the remote server, so we will do all that. So moving through these steps here. Yeah, so while that's installing, we'll just start the connecting to the VPN. So we're going to follow that link to the VPN. So this is going to be your actual username and password. So we're going to download that. Looks like our Altium finished. Nope. Okay. I didn't mean to open Altium. We'll close it back up because we got other stuff to do here. So, Altium is a big software. I'm right now using my wife's old work computer, and even though it's an old computer, it's pretty fast. She has high standards. She works from home, so she has pretty good computers. So her hand-me-downs are still better than my most of my computers. So, but this one is, you know, it can take a while to load up Altium depending on how fast your computer is. I would recommend you get kind of the fastest computer you have access to. The biggest thing though is I would recommend you have a monitor with fairly decent resolution. So at least 1080p for your monitor for using Altium. Okay, so so we got Altium installed. We got the Cisco client installed. So now what we're going to do is we are going to connect to the Western VPN. So I'm going to connect to Cisco anywhere, blah, blah, blah. So I'm going to connect to Western's VPN. And again, this is your username password. This is your Western login, which will log you in as you. Now we are connected. So we're connected right now, and we get 12 hours per connection. That's important to remember. You're going to want to, before you use the software, you're going to want to reconnect. You're going to want to make sure you stay connected to this while you're operating. You have to be connected through the VPN in order to have access to the license server. So, and to have access to the R drive. So let's do the R drive now. Oops. So in this document, let's map the R drive. We're not going to go through, I'm going to skip over this part for now. We're going to map the R drive first. So we can go to this PC computer. We're going to want to do map network drive. And we're going to want to call this the R drive. That's very important. R drive. And we're going to want to, as this says here, we're going to want to connect to a Hurricane. So I usually say connect using different credentials because if I'm logged into this computer, this is my personal computer, I don't log in with my Western ID to this computer. So I'm going to say connect using different credentials. That way it prompts me to log in with my Western credentials. So and the thing to remember when it asks you to log in with your Western credentials is you're going to want to here to do the subnet. So www/ your username. And we're going to have it remember those credentials. Hopefully it connects. Yeah. So now we're connected. Now we have, on our PC now, we have an R drive. So we have, and so if you're a student, you should, this is your R drive. This is the same as the R drive you'd have if you were on the campus computers. The difference is, well, the difference between you and me right now is I have write access to this and you probably don't. And so that shouldn't matter for the things we're doing, but it kind of matters when I'm working with it because it's possible for me to break things for you. So I have to be a little more careful. But yeah, so now we have it, now that R drive is there. So now that the R drive is mapped, the rest of this should work. In the past, sometimes it doesn't quite have this show up immediately. So we have one R drive. Sometimes when we reload Altium, it doesn't quite show up, but let's try. So we're gonna open up Altium Designer. And the first thing I'm going to try to do is I'm going to try to load preferences ahead of time if I can. So to load it looked like that we had something preset here. Oh, apparently my wife had a backup drive. Hopefully there's nothing embarrassing on there. It's on the internet now. So if you go to the R drive and you go to Altium and you go to templates, preferences and options, yeah. So this is a new Altium Working Vault 2018. This should be a sort of the new preferences file for setting up, and I hope this gets the server working. If not, the instructions tell you how to get the server set up. But it used to be that loading this, you're about to load preferences, continue, yeah. Now Altium does this every time. It pops up an error message, and the error message is back behind this, and all you can do is click the little sliver of the OK buttons there, and that's partially why I want to do the video. In Reza's tutorial, he put that in there too, but it's an important thing to note. I'm getting texted here. I'm gonna make sure it's not some critical. Nope, just spam. Okay. So let's close Altium and open it back up. And this is the key. Before we open Altium, anytime we open Altium, we want to go to our computer. We want to make sure we have the R drive mapped and active. If there's like a big red X here, you want to make sure it's active before you open up Altium. And you also need to make sure you're connected, right? In order for this drive to be mapped, you have to be connected to the VPN. So connect to the VPN. Make sure that the drive is mapped if it's not mapped. So let me show you what that looks like if it's not mapped. So if we disconnect here, and then, right, now it's not mapped, right? So if I try to do that, oh, well, maybe it had a cache. Oh, I know what's happening. I'm on Western. I'm at Western, so it lets me connect anyway. So, but if it has a big red X there, like it showed for a second, all you're going to want to do is reconnect to the VPN and then go into the drive. All you have to do is try to access the drive while it's got the red X, and it'll recognize, oh, okay, you are connected. We can connect here. It'll be fine. So that's what will happen if it becomes so before you connect to Altium, make sure you connect to the VPN, make sure the drive is active, then load up Altium. Okay, so right now it was fine. We loaded this up. It didn't seem to throw a fit. But it says, it starts up and it says we don't have any active licenses. So one thing that we can do is we can sign in. So that's that same username and password. And it looks like we still don't have licenses. So we're going to have to... Sorry. I don't know. I don't know what the deal is. Okay. So, we can try reconnect. I don't know if it's in the settings properly, but yeah, it's not liking that. So what we're going to do is we're going to set up a private license server, and we're going to do it based on the settings in the document that we had here. So setting up the private license server, the server name is this. The port is 9780. Okay, now we're active, and now look at this. Now we're using seat 2 of 25. So we connected the license server. Altium is limited by seats, so we have 25 seats to use Altium. And it is, it's good to be courteous to your peers. You know, there's more than 25 people in our class, and we have 25 seats for Altium, which means if all of you want to use it simultaneously, it's not going to work. So good practice is when you're not using Altium, and this is good for several reasons. It's kind of a memory hog and it's kind of a processor hog. So when you're not using it, close it out so you release that license. The most students I think we've ever had simultaneous is about 17 or 18, but we have a big group of students this year. So there's a lot of seniors this year who might be trying to use it. So please just be courteous as to when you're using a license. Be aware you're using a license. Okay, so we have our license server set up. And the good thing is, well, now that we have a license server set up, we can do stuff. Like we can open projects, we can create projects. So let's try that. Let's just do new project. Now look what happened when we did create new project. Because we have mapped that license server, it automatically finds this 2-layer PCB project. So this 2-layer PCB project defaults to the R drive. So the settings file that you loaded looks for this document in the R drive of your computer. And that's easy to do on campus, because on campus the R drive is the R drive. But when you're working from home, if you want to mirror this image, if you want to mirror this behavior so everything is the way you expect it, you really need to map that drive ahead of time. You got to make sure that's mapped on your computer before you start up Altium. If you don't, when you start up Altium without that R drive, it's going to throw a fit. It's going to say, I can't find the location of the R drive. Do you want me to try to create it? And it's not going to be able to create it if you try to create it. So that's why you really want to make sure you're connected to the VPN and have that drive mapped as the R drive before you start up Altium. So let's do it. Let's just create our project. Just get started here. So we'll call it PC. We'll call it EECE 320 Air Sensor Project. Okay, and we will create. Okay, now all this was doing, all we were trying to do was get this set up, but I just want to show you what it did. When we created a project, it created two things. It created a schematic sheet, which is here, and it created a PCB board, which is here. Now, a lot of times something like Altium can be really daunting, because when students look at it, it's, there's all these buttons in here and it's not really clear what all these things mean, and it's kind of, what are we doing? What is this software doing? So before we end this, I'm going to sort of just say what this software is doing. So this is electronic design automation, also called EDA software. The idea behind EDA software is As designers, we like to design things symbolically. If we have an op-amp connected to another op-amp with resistors, we like to draw the resistors as little squigglies. We like to draw the op-amps as little triangles. We like to symbolically draw everything to see how it all connects. That's different than physically connecting things, right? Physically connecting things, you have these little dip chips and you have wires or you have traces on a board. But what does it take for, if we had a design that was drawn symbolically with schematic symbols and we wanted to implement that as hardware, what would it take to do it? Well, it usually takes for each of the hardware components, like let's say we have an op-amp drawn symbolically, it would require us to find the actual op-amp part that we want to use, look up the data sheet for that part, and we'd have to see, okay, the output of the op-amp is pin 1, and the negative input to the op-amp is pin 2, and the positive input to the op-amp is pin 3. And the positive supply rail is pin 8, and the negative supply rail is pin 4, right? We'd have to know we have our symbolic representation, and we would have to know what of those ports on the symbolic representation map to the actual physical pins on the chip. And we'd also have to know physically how big is the chip. We'd have to know, is the chip surface mount? Is it through hole? Well, electronic design automation software basically does that transition for you. It's based on components, and components have two parts to them. They have a symbolic part, which is used in the schematic, which sort of shows the symbolic representation of the device. And then it has the actual PCB part. It has a part that represents the actual physical device as it exists in the real world. And so this software sort of bridges those two. We can design something symbolically by using components, and these components have tied to their symbolic representation, they have an actual physical representation. So when we add a symbolic part to our schematic, the software can say, well, if you're using this part in your schematic, I'm going to have to add a physical component to the physical PCB side. And then so we're going to manipulate things in the schematic and pull those changes over to the physical system, to the physical PCB, do manipulations on the physical PCB, and the software sort of helps us bridge the gap between the two. The software also helps us correct errors. So the software has several techniques we can use to find problems with our design. Now you can find problems in both the schematic and in the hardware. So on the schematic side, you could say, what could be a problem that could be seen in a schematic? Let's say you have two outputs. Let's say you have two pins, like the output of two op-amps. You have two op-amps, two outputs, and you connect those two outputs together. It's pretty obvious if you have two outputs tied to the same line, that's going to be a problem. You can have an output tied to a whole bunch of inputs, but you can't have multiple outputs tied to one line. So the software might say, hey, you've got multiple outputs driving the same line. That's going to be a problem. You can also identify problems in the board layer, right? If you have pins that are shorted, or if you have pins that are electrically connected that aren't supposed to be electrically connected as shown in the schematic, that's going to be a problem. If you have two pins that are shown as connected in the schematic that are not physically connected by copper metal on the PCB side, that's also going to be a problem. So the software helps us bridge the gap between the symbolic and the real world, and it helps us identify errors along the way. And so that's what we're going to do next time. So thank you for watching. Hope you were able to get this set up on your computer at home.